All right, we'll call to order the Board of Commissioners work session for November 28th, 2017. We have 3 items on the agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Warner will be here momentarily. Commissioner Fitzgerald is somewhere from the off-ramp on the plane to 465 or somewhere. He wasn't quite sure how quickly he would get here. He was landing at about 3:30, 3:45. So first topic, Highway 16, Atypical Section by Dennis Rory.
Thank you. This item's going to take a little bit different maybe path and direction from the subsequent items in that there's intentionally not a presentation for this item. We kind of thought it was best to use this time as informational and not necessarily get into the technical details and start wrestling with the technical details of what this particular item is all about. But I will give you somewhat of a summary so that you know what it is and you know that it's coming down the pike, for lack of a better term. Highway 16, as you all are aware, is a project that is in the 2018 to 2027 TIP for the state. But more importantly, what that means is it's a project that has committed funding for widening from Waxhaw Parkway in Waxhaw all the way to Ray Road in Weddington. As a part of that widening project, NCDOT is requesting from Union County and the impacted municipalities along the corridor feedback and recommendations on a cross-section for Highway 16 that they can use for design purposes and correspondingly use for cost estimating purposes. And so at a staff level, we have looked at different alternatives that we will present to the board after we get past the holiday season. But that particular cross-section or alternative that we have come up with as staff is going to differ from what's in the Highway 16 corridor plan. So if the board at that time chooses to endorse or adopt that particular staff recommendation or any variation of that recommendation that differs from the Highway 16 plan, it would indeed need to be something that's formally adopted by the board so that there's no discrepancy locally here in Waxhaw or with the public at large on what our preferences are for a cross-section for Highway 16. So that's the broad stroke of what this particular item is all about. And again, I will bring this to the board in January with a lot more technical information and presentation, and we can certainly wrestle with all of the technical aspects of it at that time. But I did want to introduce the information now so that you could hear it from me first and hear it early on and start to kind of brainstorm what maybe you all's individual preferences. So any questions right now? I know that's somewhat vague without a presentation, but certainly want to open it up for any questions, comments. Yes, sir.
So I think it would help if you walk the board through that Highway 16 is a part of a regional plan, and we just got out of a meeting where the 3 municipalities in town.
Yeah, so globally, yeah, Highway 16, as the mayor noted, is a part of a larger regional network, and several times you've heard the mayor, you've heard myself and others at times talk about Waxhaw and our connection to the larger metropolitan planning organization, CRTPO, or Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. The Highway 16 plan is indeed a part of that larger regional plan, and once we maybe go a little bit narrower than the larger MPO region and we look at Union County and Waxhaw, like I stated earlier, the county, Marvin, Weddington, and Waxhaw, we are all individually impacted by this particular project, and so it's very important that whatever cross-section we recommend locally with Waxhaw, that's coordinated with Marvin, it's coordinated with Weddington. The mayor, myself, and town manager Ferguson, we were in a meeting about 2 hours ago with Marvin, Union County, representatives from NCDOT to talk very preliminarily about this very topic and And so we informed them at the time that Waxhaw, we would be moving this dialogue through our traditional work session process and subsequently to a future board meeting where we will actually have a local decision made. After that local decision is made, we will take that information back to Marvin, Weddington, Union County, and NCDOT to try to coordinate our local interest with their individual interests as well, so that we have overall project direction to get back to NCDOT.
Dennis, do you think that we're going to have multiple sections?
It's certainly possible. We talked about that today. It's certainly possible because the overall project weaves in and out of different municipalities and some unincorporated areas. To the extent possible, we do want to coordinate those cross sections, but it would be premature for me to say yes or no that we would have one or different cross sections, but I could see us having some sort of hybrid cross section, i.e. Waxhaw has a preferred cross section that transitions to something throughout unincorporated Union County and Marvin, and then Weddington would have their preference. So how all that stuff syncs up technically, that's for maybe a subsequent not town of Waxhaw work session, but a work session among the different municipalities in the county.
Might we even have different sections in Waxhaw, where we go past commercial, where we go past residential, that type of thing?
So some of that is certainly up for debate. I would say right now, at a staff level, what we will be proposing at the beginning of the year is a uniform cross-section. The Highway 16 corridor plan as it stands now has multiple cross-sections. I think it has 4. It could be 3, but it's 3 or 4. And as we were looking at it at a staff level, a couple of cross-sections, one in particular, we really raised concerns about the feasibility of it being built. It involved not only widening of 16, but it involved some auxiliary travel lanes that would we were struggling to find that being feasible from a construction perspective and certainly a cost perspective. So what we did, at least at a staff level, is narrow down to 3 or 4 different cross-sections from the Highway 16 plan to one uniform cross-section that we believe we could carry throughout the entire project limits in Waxhaw.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And correct me if I'm wrong, so we have our Highway 16 corridor plan. The county has their multimodal regional plan.
Correct.
That basically laid out some cross sections as well. And the thing that we have to consider and why it's important that you bring it back policy wise is whatever we determine policy wise is could cost us anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million. How DOT does the allocation based upon linear feet.
Certainly, there's some significant cost implications to any cross section that we would ultimately recommend to DOT, and we'll have those numbers for you. But also, there's outside of the cost, there's the broader policy implications of this is most likely widening of Highway 16 is probably not going to happen for a number of years after this particular project, so we want to be very thoughtful about, if at all, quite frankly, being widened again, but we want to be extremely thoughtful from a policy perspective that whatever we're recommending, it coincides with our comprehensive plan. It really vets our area plan, and we could decide to stay with the area plan or go a different direction. At least right now at staff level, we're thinking a different direction, because what gets put out there outside of the cost, which is a very huge factor, it's going to be out there for a number of years, and so we want to make sure that it can withstand the test of time to the best that we have information today.
And just one last dot to connect, this is not about a budget for next year, just for the board. This is a 6-year CIP number, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I would anticipate that any cost maybe above and beyond maybe what the DOT is planning for now, it would not necessarily be a one-year budget decision to be something that we would have to roll up in a longer conversation. I know that the manager's been working on that with other projects. I would anticipate it would fall into that same line of conversation, but I don't want to make that as a definitive statement, because largely, the manager will kind of figure out which conversation it makes better sense for it to be in.
And could you explain to the board why we need to make a policy decision in the January timeframe?
Yeah, absolutely. So NCDOT has requested of us, Weddington, Marvin, and the county feedback on this cross-section. They actually wanted it by Thanksgiving. We thought that was a bit aggressive given the implications of the decision. So it's the state is driving the need for the feedback so that they can incorporate the feedback into the design plans and keep the project on schedule. And so we were freely, at least in my opinion, understanding that a January decision does have a schedule impact and implication. It could delay the design portion of the project, not necessarily the overall project at this point, but we felt that this was a significant enough decision for our community that we needed to be thoughtful about how we step through the decision and try to get the decision as close to accurate or as right as we can get it, however we choose to define right.
Any questions for Dennis? All right, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, presentation of preliminary concepts for downtown pedestrian and bicycle improvements, also known as the TAP grant. Kurt White.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for that clarification. Yeah, the official project name is the Downtown Waxhaw Pedestrian and Bicycle Facility Enhancements. That's how that's what NCDOT calls it. We call it the TAP grant because it's a lot easier, and that's what how we've been referring to it since we were awarded the grant. So I just wanted to go over the schedule, some of the progress we've made so far, and then the preliminary concepts that we've gotten from our engineering firm that we're working with right now. And I do want to emphasize that what we'll go through today are just concepts, and so we are still in the phase right now where we are taking feedback both from citizens, from the board, and at staff level as well to help kind of form what the final concepts and then ultimately the design of the project will look like. So first of all, just to refresh everyone's memory, the TAP grant really looked at 5 key areas. First of all was parking, but specifically parking safety, to get access to the parking spaces. And not necessarily adding new parking as a stated goal, but just improving the accessibility for the parking spaces that we do currently have. Also looking at traffic and safety, how traffic flows through town, pedestrian connectivity, the bicycle enhancements, and then concurrently with this project, we would do the install new streetlights in downtown, which is part of a separate funding source, but we would like to do it at the same time as the construction for the pedestrian improvements happen as well. So those are the main areas. First, the high-level schedule you see here. We did our programming last year, kind of scoped out the project. Right now, we are in the pre-construction phase, specifically engineering and design. So I've been doing that since July. Mid-July is when we kicked that piece of it off. Still have construction targeted for late 2018 and ongoing through 19. To drill down a little bit into the schedule, though, when I say that we're in the pre-construction phase, here's what's happened as part of that over the past 4 months or so. So in August, we started surveying the entire area, which encompasses a good portion of the whole downtown area. Also, did the environmental required environmental impact work for NCDOT. We did a field audit where we actually walked around downtown with some citizens, with Main Street Advisory Board members to look at conditions on the ground and really get out there and see where the opportunities for improvement were, and to kind of test some of the assumptions that we had and some of the recommendations that we've seen in our plans, such as the downtown vision plan. So concepts started to be developed. In September, the survey was ongoing. We were doing some ped counting, because that'll help to guide where and what kind of crosswalks go in the various locations throughout downtown. And we also started coordinating with specifically with the Mill on Main developer to try to see how we could best coordinate that sidewalk connection to the pedestrian bridge. Through October, it was a busy month. We got our first preliminary concepts that you see in front of you, and we had a focus group meeting with the property owners and business owners on East North Main Street to get their feedback on the proposed pedestrian plaza along East North Main Street. We had a great turnout. In fact, every property owner and business owner came out to that meeting, and so we had a real and also some Main Street Advisory Board people as well. So we had a really good showing and really drilled down into some of the ideas for that concept, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. We started CSX railway coordination, because some of the proposed sidewalks could be in their right of way, and started in earnest the Duke Energy streetlight coordination, because they really need about a year of advance notice to be able to start coordinating that with us. And so this past month, just ongoing revision of the concepts with staff feedback heavily, and then some citizen comments as well, and now today with the board. So we'll go, yes?
A couple questions back to the schedule.
Yes.
What happens between early 2018 and late 2018? Is there anything the board could be doing to facilitate accelerating the project or anything like that? Just seems like a long time.
Between early 2018 and
I'm
mid?
just looking, we're here at the end of 2017 and construction begins late 2018.
So part of what that is, this is really the time where we would look for the most feedback and suggestions from the board, because what happens, the reason that time frame is so long is after the concept phase, that's really where it's very malleable. Everything from general scope to the specifics of the individual kind of block by block of Main Street. Once we're done with concept, they're moving into design. They're actually going to they're working on construction drawings, and at that point it's not really, that's why that process starts taking a little longer, because they're building construction documents for us. And then what has to happen even to get to construction, because it's a federal grant and it's going through DOT, there would then be a period where we would have to go through the DOT's bidding process, so that it kind of elongates the process a little bit. Final design is slated. We're supposed to have final design plans no later than June. Our engineering firm, Gresham Smith and Partners, says that they would like to be able to have that to us sooner, June at the latest, but then even after that, there would be a couple months of going through NCDOT's requirements to get construction.
Then the second part of the question I have is late 2018, fall 2018, that's typically our busiest season downtown with events. I assume somewhere in the project plan there's some coordination of how are we going to manage that, because it's hectic enough
Right.
downtown to begin with, and then you have construction. That would be something I would want to maybe see come back and say how are we going to manage that, not to immerse myself in it, but just to say, hey, that's one that waves a flag at me.
Sure. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Thanks.
I'm going to pull up the concept here, so if Nick can maximize that. Yeah, and I think everyone should have a hard copy in front of them, or at least on the iPads. But what you're seeing first, you've got about 5 or 6 different aerials here. And the first one you see, the water tower lot, you're looking west. West is out at the top here. And what we're seeing, or what's being proposed here, is just broadly some sidewalk here along North Broome Street, sidewalk along McDonald Street to finish that connection to the McDonald House. Some crosswalk improvements at the intersection of Howie Mine and North Broome Street. Possible on-street parking here at North Broome along the water tower gravel lot. And you see, this will be in another screen more and more in depth, but that's part of the East North Main Street plaza there. Crosswalk improvement here, a shift from where the crosswalk is currently on the south side of the Broome and North Main Street intersection. The proposal would shift that to the northern side of that intersection, since that's where most of the pedestrians naturally want to cross and where all the businesses that generate the foot traffic are. On the following screen, you see a little further north of Broome Street, some additional sidewalk improvements along in front of this is the Parks and Rec offices here. Stop and Shop, Farmers Market. So you're seeing the continued sidewalk and crosswalk improvements along this section of downtown as well. Here is one of the most impactful proposals in this package.
Can you go back to the first
Yeah.
one? I'm still trying to sequence these.
Sure.
So on the first one, you're moving the crosswalk from close to the train tracks back to the other side.
Yes, away from the train tracks.
But you're not adding one on Howie Mine McDonald Street there.
Howie Mine McDonald.
You're not
Here.
right there. You're not adding one there.
We've asked them since this came out, actually, since staff received this in October, we've asked the consultant to see if it's possible to put one here.
Okay.
We know that we get requests frequently from citizens for a crosswalk here. The challenge, what we're dealing with, is we have the parking for Crossroads Coffee Shop is here and here, and there's not really, they were having a hard time finding room for it. But we asked them to try to come back with something.
Thank you.
So, okay, so we did that one. Okay. I also want to point out what we're looking at when you're looking at the North Broome Street here, some driveway consolidation. This will help improve the perception of safety for pedestrians. Right now it's this big open expanse of concrete in front of the gas station here and in front of the Stop and Shop. To be able to kind of consolidate these driveways and make them marked more clearly will help with people's feelings of safety as they walk along in front of those businesses, and also help with how traffic flows more efficiently in and out of those places. This is the East North Main Street, what we're calling the pedestrian plaza, and the reason we're calling it that is because what we're doing or proposing to do is bump out these sidewalks here in front of the businesses along East North Main Street. So for reference, this is the Indigo Pearl Antiques on Main, the Dream Chasers Brewery, and we would propose to increase the width of the sidewalk here and to provide some bump outs here to provide even more space for possible outdoor activities or outdoor dining at some point. To do this without eliminating parking spaces, the street could be changed to a one-way street. So that way you haven't lost any parking. There's still room for that, but you also get more sidewalk as well. And the feedback we got from the business and property owners was overwhelmingly positive on this, because it's for them, they see it as a way of just providing some enhanced uses of their properties, and for the current business owners, they see it as a way of having more space potentially to utilize if the town were to develop some sort of a right-of-way use permit process to allow some outdoor dining, whether it be for the creamery or any other businesses along that street. What this also does, and you'll see this in a minute, which is a request through the years from what I understand and from what I've experienced, is as you know, the sidewalk is very high right there. It's probably almost up to 2 feet in certain sections along East North Main, to where you can't even park your car without hitting your car door on the side. This would make it possible to reduce that grade differential between the sidewalk and the road, because you would come out and they would work in the grade reduction on the sidewalk as it went towards the road. So you achieve several things by doing this concept. Now we are on East-South Main here. And so for reference, here's the pedestrian bridge, the overhead bridge, and on this corner we have the Upchurch Realty. So what this is doing is, here you see a sidewalk meeting the pedestrian bridge and going towards the Mill on Main development. You see the sidewalk coming in here, and actually a new sidewalk behind the cars that are behind the on-street parking, and then connecting to the existing sidewalk here at Broome Street. This would require a minor modification to the bridge to make this happen, and we are currently working with CSX to get their approval on that, and we also would have to work through the Waxhaw Historic Preservation Commission to apply for a change as well. So, and we don't know. I mentioned crosswalks, and that is a big piece of this. When we're talking about crosswalks, we're not necessarily just saying that we're going to paint new ones or improve the markings on the ones we have right now. That may be what happens to several of them, but we're hoping to be able to add some signalization or some pedestrian activated crosswalks or some other kind of different tools that are out there to be able to alert cars that a crosswalk is coming. So that's the reason for the PED counts that we're doing right now, is to try to decide where those can go, where they will be supported by NCDOT. Hopefully a crosswalk here at the pedestrian bridge could be more substantial than just paint on the ground. This is just a view of the sidewalk going from the pedestrian bridge, which would be right here where the laser pointer is, connecting to the Mill on Main development to tie into their existing crosswalk there, or sidewalk there. Next we see, this is a view of West North Main Street. Here you see the gas station, and here's the Barnes Park. So crosswalks again, looking at a way to provide some more clear delineation for pedestrians to get from their cars to the park or to the businesses further down. This would be the proposal here is showing a raised sidewalk that pedestrians would actually be able to use and the cars would be able to drive over. Looking at when we are doing this stuff, that parking is accessible. We're looking at, whenever we're doing improvements, wherever possible, we have asked the engineering firm to make accessible cuts for the sidewalk at all the intersections. So that's a part of this as well. We've asked them to consider placement of handicapped parking places throughout downtown as well. I should note that. And this is a accessible route in Barnes Park. Yes.
as I asked you earlier, is there any history of the safety of having a sidewalk between a asphalt road and a parking space where people are walking and driving across that sidewalk to get in and out of diagonal parking spaces?
Thank you. Yes. So when Gresham Smith and Partners looked at this piece right here, what we have here is, as we know, the current condition is that pedestrians are getting out of their cars and they're just crossing most anywhere that they can. Most people aren't walking all the way down to the crosswalks. So after observing what is happening naturally, the thought was that putting a sidewalk behind the cars in the grass here and also in CSX right-of-way would not change the natural movement, that people's behavior wouldn't change because they're already crossing where they're crossing. And so, and also there was less room on West-South Main with regard to the railroad to put a sidewalk on the other side of the cars. With regard to the will it be safe question, the proposal would be to, while you are doing a raised sidewalk, to also add some clarity, visual clarity to where that sidewalk ends and where the asphalt begins, with bollards starting at the beginning of where the sidewalk starts, bookending it, and then some other kind of markings. We don't have all the.
You're not there yet.
Not quite there yet, but those questions are certainly being asked.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
On this section, have you thought about taking away the railroad ties and putting concrete instead of retaining islands on that parallel parking area?
Oh, in these areas?
Yes. Put curb and gutter in that area?
That's a good question. We had not proposed that
Because we
here.
have a problem with the railroad ties moving about and not retaining the islands.
Sure. Thank you. Yes.
So I get that this is whatever facility, also known as the TAP grant. It's primarily pedestrian. But as I look at it, and I read through your presentation in preparation, you talk about like the proposal to make one-way, change two-way to one-way, and things like that. What level of work are we doing with DOT on 75 and 16? Because I would assume that they have to look into and approve those kind of things. That's not something we can just arbitrarily do. And the thing that comes to mind with this drawing in particular, the one that you had up in particular, was constant complaints you get on 75 is you can't go past somebody on the right while they're turning left because we don't have a turn lane there. And it just backs traffic up. And there's several of those little nuances.
Right.
Are we doing anything with DOT, or are we, as we make or look at these, or is that down the road, or maybe you can explain?
Well, so, and you are correct. The TAP grant, as far as the TAP grant funds are concerned, it really has to be spent on pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Now, as we're doing this sort of thing, if other items come up, the left turn lane, we didn't ask the consultant to consider that piece because of the amount of it. It would have eaten up a lot of our available funds for the TAP portion of it. But if those kind of things need to be considered in conjunction with this, similar to how we did the street lights, they're being considered at the same time, then yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we should.
And I don't know
Yeah.
how involved Dennis and Matt are on those things. It's just something I put out there.
Sure. Because I would say that there's been other proposals throughout the year, not just that one, but there's existing construction drawings for West North Main Street, and so that's not being designed. It's also not funded. So there's other questions that we might need to ask. What makes sense to do at the same time? This is just a closer up view of the west or east north Main Street Plaza, and or more of an artistic rendition. And I would just caution that I would not take this as look at this as a very, very sketched concept, because staff has already provided some feedback that could change how this looks. But what they're doing here is they're trying to handle the grade difference with some, I guess you would call them planning boxes, so that you still have flat spaces on to walk and to gather, but you also get rid of that sidewalk height. And we've asked for some clarification on what are the dimensions of this? How much extra space are we actually going to get if we do this particular concept? Is it worth it to do that? This is still very much in the concept phase. The other option is just like the first one, except that it would eliminate 2 parking spaces in front of the current Dream Chasers Brewery.
What kind of changes were you talking about that would be done to the bridge?
Extremely minor. If you look at the bridge, if you're looking at it from, pretend you're at the JB's barbecue, looking across the bridge, there's 4 railroad ties that are actually not even connected to the main structure. They're just kind of buried, or they're not. Sorry, they're not structural. They are connected to it with bolts, but they stick out directly under the bridge, whereas the stairs come down to the left side. So it would require removing those 4 railroad ties to be able to fit the sidewalk.
Over the past couple of months, we've heard a lot about handicap parking. Is there a formula for so many spaces equals how many handicap spaces?
I don't know if there's a formula, but we have asked specifically that the consultant look at a handicap space on each of the 4 blocks. By that I mean west, north, Main, east, north, Main. Yep. The four main blocks, to ensure that there are real, and by real I mean conforming to
EDA standards.
Yeah, the actual standards.
Right.
Yeah, instead of just painting the.
Because I mean, on here it's not indicated anywhere handicap, so I wasn't sure what the plan was for that.
Yes, and thank you for asking. That's actually something that staff asked them after we received this. We'll receive, so there's jumping ahead a couple of slides, there's a public meeting on December 7th, which is a drop-in style public meeting, and the consultant is supposed to have revisions to these concepts based on the feedback that we've given them thus far. Thanks.
I see very minimal amount of changes on South Main, on the shops across there. Is that correct?
South, which part of Main Street?
The south side of South Main.
South side of South Main. Okay.
South Main. Yeah. I see no changes, no walks. I mean, pretty much going to stay the same.
Yes, you're correct. Most of the proposals here, you see, there's a crosswalk here. But most of the concern was getting people from where this parking was to here safely. Whereas right now their parking here is working pretty well. There's also I don't know if it should be on here. Maybe there's one other thing. You may have it in your packet. You may not. We may be missing one piece, but there's a sidewalk proposed on South Church to go from what is the Fusion's Salon parking lot along the west side of South Church to connect to the skate park. A sidewalk. Right now, there's not one.
Okay, right, yeah, that's just an open, I can see that the whole problem is there's a lot of blending of traffic and pedestrians.
Yes, yes, that's right.
I mean, I always worry coming down 16, turning right on 75. I mean, you come around that corner and people are always milling around, getting out of the cars, et cetera, things like that.
We can look at that, specifically the 16 and 75 part as well.
Okay, so I see what you're saying on South Church there, but it's not shown, there's nothing shown on there now. We might be missing one, but they are. I can make sure y'all get that. They're also on the website. Okay.
Are there any other questions on the specific to these concepts, or? Yeah, and one thing I want to go back to when we talked about the coordination with the developer, with the Mill on Main developer, DHD Ventures, there was a request by the developer to expedite the construction of this sidewalk here. That connects the mill to the pedestrian bridge, because they're already open. And while we have it planned, it's going to be at least another year till it actually is there. So there was a request to expedite that. We're working with DOT to see how we can do that within the confines of the grant funding. It looks like we would have the ability to expedite that one portion of the project. And then perhaps do a reimbursement agreement directly with the developer instead of DOT. But we haven't ironed out the details on that quite yet.
Again, as we talked earlier, I know that this is a grant, a TAP grant, and we're matching the funds. The town is matching the funds of the TAP grant. But as we move forward in the future, has there been any consideration given as we improve people's properties to get them to participate, perhaps through special tax districts or things like that? I mean, in new communities, price of the house includes all the sidewalks and this, that, and the other thing. And I understand there's a balance between improving downtown Waxhaw, making it more attractive, making it more useful. But it kind of reminds me of the fact that we aren't allowed to charge impact fees, so the developers are basically passing costs off to the taxpayers. Are we in effect sort of doing this also? Or is there people that own these buildings, people that operate these stores and businesses? Is there a way, or has anybody thought about perhaps a cost sharing program sometime in the future as we get more and more into it?
Yeah, I don't know if we've thought about that in great detail. There are throughout the state downtowns who choose to have municipal service districts or MSDs where there is greater benefit accrued to those individual properties in exchange for a higher tax rate. That's how some towns do it. I don't know about, we haven't really thought through that in much detail there.
There is a process that involves actual election, so the property owners have to vote to impose that higher level of taxation, and there would be a plan put together to kind of describe what would be, first of all, the boundaries, and then what the use of funds would be, and usually capital or some sort of, you can do some operating out of it, but it mainly would be capital. But it would have to be voluntary to a certain extent. I'll say it's either 66 or 75% of the property owners have to opt in.
Nick, do we want to go back to the presentation? Thanks.
And I don't know if we're going to get into it completely at the retreat in January, but part of what I think you were thinking of as a discussion is to back to the CIP. What are all the things? What are all our immediate priorities and needs? And then maybe look at it more holistically as to what are the funding sources and what is the appetite that has or the citizens have, rather than look at it on a project basis.
So I just wanted to kind of end here with a real quick run through of the feedback we have gotten from stakeholders. If there's any other feedback or thoughts, questions that the board wants to share or make sure are considered in the concept phase, please share those with Greg, and we can get them to the consultant. There's still some leeway there to add those or incorporate some of that feedback. I just wanted to highlight that we have done a good deal of engagement with the downtown stakeholders, starting really, as I've said in previous presentations, this whole thing really began with the Downtown Vision Plan in 2012, as a lot of the general themes in this are coming from that. But then most recently we've gotten a lot more granular with our feedback, and you see, as the mayor mentioned, here's a comment about a right on red, 75 and 16. A lot of overall, we've seen good support for the pedestrian plaza one-way street idea. A lot of feedback's revolved around crosswalks, parking, as always. Main Street Advisory Board's been there really coordinating this, and I would give a lot of credit to them. They've been the ones who have done a lot of the legwork in terms of getting people to show up for these meetings and making their places of business available to host them. I do want to point out, if you're interested in seeing everything that was mentioned at the meeting with the East North Main Street property owners last month, the meeting minutes for that are on the town website in the downtown development section of the website. You can see it's a couple pages of really great feedback that we got on that. Staff has mentioned some of these things I've highlighted throughout our conversation today that staff has also added that we hope to see in the next iteration of these concepts. There's the accessible spaces, for example, some issues about right-of-way use. There's the parking safety question about West-South Main Street. So the next steps, we do have the public meeting December 7th. That's going to be a drop-in style between 4 and 7. That's in the middle suite of the Niven Price building. And then after that, the consultant will continue to work to complete concepts, to refine them based on the feedback that they continue to receive. Yes?
So I think that public meeting will be the 5th, maybe interaction, 4th or 5th, and you're asking us for input. What criteria is the engineer developer using to, hey, this is a good idea, that's a lousy idea? I mean, what are they going? What process are you going through with that?
So a lot of it has to do with just I would say the two biggest ones. One, can the grant fund it? Because, for example, when folks some requests are, hey, we want a parking lot behind Maxwell's. Well, that's not something that can be really considered as part of this grant. But then secondly, will DOT allow it? Because we're working in DOT right-of-way for the overwhelming majority of this project. So the consultant works closely with DOT and CSX to see to what extent different comments can be incorporated. And then staff has been providing feedback as well. Property owners too. I mean, we're kind of trying to just balance a lot of different interests, because even if we had gone to that East North Main Street meeting and every single property owner had said they didn't like the idea, it would be a harder thing for staff to want to sell. After the next kind of rendition of concept development, there will be another public meeting, And then the consultant at that point will move into actual creating construction documents and ready to build.
Do you anticipate having more needs and wants than money?
That's a very good question. So, yeah, always, I guess. There's a lot of opportunity downtown. I think if not everything in the downtown vision plan was incorporated in this. And one thing I mentioned earlier was there are construction drawings. If you notice, there's not a lot of improvements being proposed on North Main between Broome Street and the Niven Price building. And that was in part because we have some CDM Smith construction plans from 2015, spring of 15, that actually we already have the construction plans for that. They were just never implemented. It was with it was actually with Town Manager Mahar. And so that's just one example of improvements that could be made that probably wouldn't be able to be funded with the TAP money. So I think that's about it. Yeah.
Other questions for Kurt? Do you anticipate coming back to the board anytime soon? Do you want us to come to the meeting on the 7th?
Sure. Yeah. Anyone who wants to come out, please do. And yes, I anticipate coming back to the board again before we get through the design phase of this.
And I guess the last question I'll ask is, assuming we have more needs, wants than the grant funds, is that something you would bring back and ask the board if we want to go after it funding wise?
Yeah, I think the timing's going to be a little bit interesting to get the final plans and constructions, and then getting construction documents, and then get real-time pricing on what we're wanting to build. That's going to be after the budget is adopted, most likely. So
Yes.
that's we'll just have to kind of play that one by ear. We may have to have some parts of this as we get the architect or engineering firm to do the cost estimation. There may be some things that we need to put out as alternates and kind of save, just to see. But we could come back mid-year and talk about inclusion of things that are a little bit over the budget.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Okay, finally, presentation of slate of recommended applicants to fill current midterm board commission vacancies by the Organization Advisory Board. The presenter will be one Mr. Don Fisher, the OAB chairman.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Manager Ferguson, Town Clerk Schuler, Assistant Town Clerk Curry, thank you for the opportunity to represent the board, the OAB board, to give you our latest slate of candidates that we'd ask for you to consider. We've got a slide presentation here, and let's see if we can get this going. We were challenged with 4 current vacancies on 3 boards. One is the Main Street Advisory Board, expires 9/30. PCR, Parks, Cultural, Recreation Board, expires 7/30/2020. The Planning Board, regular member, expires 9/30/2020. Planning Board, alternate member, expires 9/30/2018. On October the 9th, we had a meeting and we identified vacancies at that meeting. We acknowledged that there were 17 applicants who supplied 41 applications. Most of 17 applied for up to 3 boards. We identified which OAB members were most appropriate to research applicants for each vacancy, and go out and vet and interview and bring back what the comments that they found. During October, November, we took that time to review the applications, discuss skill sets with board chairs and staff liaison at our quarterly meeting. We contacted and interviewed the applicants, and we discussed top applicants with the board chairs and liaisons. On November 13th, we brought forth top candidates with reasoning supporting their recommendations. I would say real quick that the last chair quarterly meeting that we had at the McDonald House was outstanding. We got some excellent feedback from those either vice chairs or chairs that attended, and this is something that we look forward to bringing to you later in January or February, and telling you what we've done. I know Manager Ferguson, you attended one of those, as Mayor Maher has, and we appreciate the comments that y'all brought. We forwarded a recommendation to the BOC to appoint 3 of the 4 vacant positions which you have at this time. No recommendations were brought forth for the planning board alternate. We will be having some more resignations due to the elections, and we felt like that we've got some more applications that are coming in, and we felt like it would not be fair to that planning board alternate positions to go ahead and fill one now and not fill all of them at the same time. So what we're asking you to do is take a look at the Main Street candidate. The term expires 9/30/20, Laura Friedrich. She lives in the downtown area, very interested, interviewed well, etc., and feel like that she will be a good candidate to fill that position. For the Parks and Rec, we had a situation happen, and some way, somehow, Claudia, there was a mix-up in some paperwork, and so we're reappointing her. She should never have gone off in the first place, and she'll be a strong candidate. We visited with town staff on that, and they totally agree that she's an asset to that committee. The planning board regular member with the 9/30/20 expiration date, we're recommending that we promote current alternate member Scott Shelton to the regular member seat for the planning board, and then we'll have that position plus another position come open, and whatever happens with the 3rd resignation when that happens. So there'll be 3 recommendations we'll bring back to you here as quick as we get those recommendations, or y'all take a look at the resignation letters, approve them, and then we are contacted by the clerk's office to get together and finish the interviewing. I'd also like to say that the town clerk's office has done a great job here recently with working with Jenny Buckholt to do some more public relations on attempting to get more applications. We've really seen, since the work that the town clerk's office has done on the application, we've seen a great stride in the quality of applicants we're getting based on the skills that both Commissioner Burns and Mayor Maher and the rest of the board authorized us to go by, which we greatly appreciate. It does make our job easier. And lastly, I'd like to recognize Terry Settle, who's here tonight, and Ann Simpson, who helped with this, attended the meetings, etc. I will tell you that Ann did excuse herself from any voting because of the election race at that time, and then former member Earl Cook and the work that he did prior to going off at our last meeting. So anyway, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have, any concerns that you have, and we will entertain any thoughts that you've got at this time.
Questions?
Yes.
So we have 2 people coming off, so that would have 2 vacancies on the planning board, 1 on the Board of Adjustments.
Right. That's correct.
Both of which are legislative.
Right.
The sooner we advertise for those, the better. We don't want to leave the planning board specifically
We will not do that.
exposed.
I promise you. I promise you, we will not do that. So we're ready to go as soon as we get more applications in. Currently, I think we've got about 41 applications. Is that right? Okay. And we'll go back through those and take a look at them and get something to you as quick as possible. Any questions?
Just one other thing for the board's sake. I did verify at the request of Commissioner-elect Weselick regarding Scott Shelton, since that's her significant other. And there is no statutory legal conflict of interest there whatsoever between the planning board and her being as a board of commissioner, new commissioner in the board of commissioners. So that's been cleared up. She asked the question last night at her orientation session, and we cleared that up. So if we have no other questions,
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
and with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the work session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
See you back here in about 55 minutes.